Hello and a warm welcome to Federal Special Program Capital Beat. Russian President Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Modi today exchanged memorandums of understanding in areas like trade and agriculture. They didn't take questions when the joint statement happened, but Modi outlined plans to forge closer ties between the two countries. Prime Minister Modi said that they'd opened two new Indian consulates in Russia and announced two new tourist visa schemes. On the war in Ukraine, Modi said that India had stood for peace since the beginning. He welcomed the efforts to find a lasting solution and said that India was ready to contribute in the future. On the energy front, and that is very important, Putin said that Russia was ready to continue uninterrupted fuel shipments to India. And this is the story which is making loud headlines across the news channels, that Putin has said that Russia will continue uninterrupted fuel shipments to India. And he also referenced a flagship nuclear plant being built in India. Then Russia Today will be launched in India, which of course is a TV channel, which Putin said will help Indians learn more about his country through the broadcasting of objective information. Putin said that he and Modi were cooperating on foreign policy, including through their coalition of BRICS countries to promote a more just and multipolar world. The big question is that what are the genuine outcomes of this visit? Has Prime Minister Modi been able to balance between Donald Trump and, of course, Vladimir Putin? Because all eyes would be on how America would react. So, what are the major and how does one look at this particular visit of Putin? Joining me this evening is Sanjay Kapoor, international affairs expert and veteran journalist. Thank you so much for joining. We have K.S. Dakshinamurthy, who is the managing editor of the Federal, also an international affairs expert. Thank you so much for joining, Dakshin. And I'll begin with Sanjay. Sanjay, what is your assessment of the joint statement which took place and the rest of the events which followed? Of course, Putin will wind up his trip around 9 p.m. India time. But how would you look at the day-long events which happened, and how would you look at it in terms of outcome of this visit?
Thank you for inviting me to speak on President Putin's visit to India. I think it's a very significant visit, primarily because President Putin chose to come to India, and it's not that he's not been here before. There's been yearly summits that they were taking part in till the Ukraine war happened. So after the Ukraine war, maybe 4 years after it, you have the early visit by the president here. So a lot has been achieved. I think if you look at it, Prime Minister Modi was under pressure from the United States of America, especially after tariffs had been imposed on India, 50% of which is probably one of the highest in the world. After maybe China or Russia, for that matter, China they have scaled down, but there have been such increase in the tariff and making India absolutely feeling very vulnerable. But the discussion that took place, or the events that unfolded in the last 24 hours, suggests that Russia wants to use its experience of taking on the sanctions and tariffs to educate India that look here, there is a world beyond that. There's a lot of things that can be done together. Russia is a labor scarce country. India is a labor surplus country. So there was this discussion around that also. Then you also had the promise to increase in trade between the two countries to about $100 billion. There were also suggestions that the two corridors may be reactivated, one which would take from Madras to Vladivostok, and the other one is in the India INSTC, National Transport Corridor between India, which will cut through, which will save a lot of time and also not keep India hostage to Suez Canal. So there is a very clear attempt to take India away from the stranglehold of the American, or you can say Western hold in some ways. I don't know whether India will buy all that, because despite the pressure that's been mounted by the United States of America that India should not buy oil now. They used to buy oil and gas earlier, but now they have been told that if you buy more oil, then they will continue to face more sanctions. So India has begun to scale down one of the Indian companies, Reliance is.
Sanjay, can I just interrupt you for a moment? Because when Donald Trump and when it comes to Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi, we've all along been speaking about the pressure from Trump's end. Now, of course, the optics and all looked very good as far as Prime Minister Modi and Putin were concerned. But in private, do you think that Vladimir Putin could have put some pressure on Prime Minister Modi into buying oil? Because it's a tough balancing act ultimately for India.
No, I don't think President Vladimir Putin can put pressure, because the fact of the matter is that the oil or the shale gas and all that was coming from the U.S., and India could have shifted once again in terms of sourcing its supply from the Arab world, from the Islamic world, because before 2022, India's reliance on Russian oil was just about 1 to 2%, which is more symbolic than anything else. So there was nothing that prevented India from going back. So Russia has actually asked India to buy, also because India is facing the heat of this, what is it called, the sanctions, and they think by giving a, announcing to the world that they are buying oil from Russia, they would be able to tell Russia that, look here, we are not really bothered about it. But it all depends whether India really wants to go that far, whether it is really keen to cock a snook at President Donald Trump and tell him that he can get off wherever he wants, because this is going to get more tense. The entire confrontation, if it really happens, because U.S. is not going to back off, even if India stops buying oil from Russia. That is something that Mr. Modi has realized, and that is why he's using Russia as a leverage to convey a message to President Donald Trump that, look here, you have to look at us afresh. You cannot really do whatever you're doing, whether it is playing footsie with the Pakistanis or doing a G2 kind of thing with China. So there are too many wheels within wheels, but the fact of the matter is that the world is changing, and changing very rapidly. And it all depends how it all plays out in the coming days. But let's see where we take the world to be.
Dakshin, I'll come to you. On various fronts, the things happened, like on the energy front, then on the broadcasting front, trade, defense, a lot of things. But what, according to you, was the point which stood out during this visit of Putin? Was it that when he said that Russia will continue with the uninterrupted fuel shipments to India? Is that sort of a marker in today's events?
Overall, in the visit of Putin and the summit, shows that it's more of intent. Number one, number two, it's very clear that Russia and India do not want to let go each other. Come what may, because both both India and Russia both realize that it is very crucial for them to continue with the relationship. For Putin, it is important to continue whatever whatever he was dealing with as far as India was concerned, and definitely as far as India is concerned, Russia has been a huge support all these years. So India, just doesn't want to let go. So fundamentally, his visit here, serves a number of things. The very fact that he's arrived here is also, and then the kind of treaties that they have signed, even if some of them are smaller, they don't really make a big ticket issue, other than the reloads agreement, which of course the Russian Duma ratified, but which was not part of the summit meeting. The issue is India doesn't want to let go, but at the same time it has to oblige Trump, because whatever Putin might say about uninterrupted fuel supplies, the fact of the matter is, if you look carefully, there are companies that have been sanctioned by the US in Russia. So what India has basically done is it has stopped buying oil from companies that have been sanctioned by the US, and looking for to buy oil from companies that have not been sanctioned. There are also companies, Russian oil companies, that have not been sanctioned. So India is routing some supplies from them. At the same time, when Putin says that he will continue uninterrupted fuel supply, well, it is possible for a while, because if you look at Trump's diktat, what is it? It says that Modi, in fact, Trump was quoting Modi to say that India would gradually reduce supplies from Russia. He didn't say it would be abrupt. So India is still in the process. In fact, today there are reports, in the newspapers that compared to last October, this October, India's oil buy from Russia was less by 30%. So there is definitely on the ground a reduction in oil imports from Russia, whatever the leaders might say. So on the ground, India is going with what Trump has said. At the same time, it is not very abrupt or very dramatic. It's happening gradually. But at the same time, India also doesn't want to completely antagonize Russia. So you have these other treaties and in some kind of a deal which where there is a more of a interaction, not maybe as far as fuel is concerned, but on other fronts is probably happening. That's what it looks like, the summit.
Right. But Dakshin, how do you think America might react? I'm sure Donald Trump is going to say something or the other because it's going to be early morning in America now. So, what kind of a reaction can we expect after this day long optics between Prime Minister Modi and Putin?
It is, it is going to be pretty interesting. In fact, the purpose of the summit, in fact, I would say partly is optics and for India to assert its, stand that it will not let go of Russia. So there is going to be some kind of a reaction from the US. What I would say is that right now, Trump may not make any kind of a dramatic or may not react very strongly because Trump is also talking with Putin to end the war with Ukraine. So there is some kind of a patch up that has happened between Trump and Putin. So I don't think the reaction from the US will be as sharp as what one would expect.
Okay, so you are saying that America might not react that sharply as we might expect, Sanjay. But in terms of other outcomes, like say for example, on the nuclear bit, I also want to understand from you that what exactly is in the offing as far as the nuclear plant is concerned. There was a talk on that as well. What does it mean as far as the nuclear energy is concerned?
India has an old relationship with Russia when it comes to nuclear energy. They was supportive of, in the Kunan-Kulam, the nuclear
Yeah.
plant also. And in fact, I remember when Manmohan Singh was the prime minister, he was very adamant that the entire process would go through because there was a lot of demonstrations that are taking place against Kudan by the anti-nuclear lobby, and suggestions were that these people have been supported by international NGOs and people from the West. So I'm sure something similar will come up like Kudan in the area. I don't know the area because I haven't followed that, but which area is being left open. But quite clearly, this is considered to be clean energy, and there would be something that will to provide a certain say energy self-sufficiency on to India in some ways. But it remains to be seen where to be putting up. But having said that, India would be taking energy from Russia because, as Mr. Putin, in his interview to India today, has said it very categorically that why is U.S. so touchy about it? They've been buying uranium fuel from us, and if India is buying energy or petroleum from us, so what is so wrong about it? So what he was trying to do is to equate the two of them together and said there's nothing wrong with India. But the fact of the matter is that there's always a fear that sanctions would be hiked against India because the reasons why Mr. Trump is putting pressure on India is just not Russia alone. It could have been it could have happened even if India would have played according to the rules and done everything properly, because I think there is far more between Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi. And but I can tell you this will be a precipitating factor for Russia, for US to show us the riot act in when it comes to putting all kinds of sanctions against us. And let's see how it plays out because India is using Russia as a leverage. It has stayed away from Donald Trump for quite a while. Mr. Modi has been ducking events where he could intersect with Mr. Trump, and again it would be seen that how he will react to the entire situation. But I think these aren't very happy times. It could only become better if there is a deal between Russia and the US, on Ukraine. That could be the starting point of mellowing the relationship between the two, because Russia then could be in a mediator between Mr. Trump and India. But without that, I think it'll become worse as the days pass by.
Right. I also want to come on to the targets, Dakshin, which have been pledged between India and Russia on the trade front. Now they have set a target of $100 billion, which is by 2030. Now, given the pace at which the business is taking place between India and Russia, do you think that's a realistic target, or and they have their eyes very keenly set on that type of a target, or is it something which or in a generic manner they've arrived at a figure just to send out a message to Donald Trump?
I
See
think there
what
is.
happened. Uh,
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay. So I'll first go to Dakshin and then come back to Sanjay. Yes, Dakshin.
See,
Yeah.
what is what has happened is since the time India started buying oil from Russia, recently after Russia faced sanctions following the Ukraine war, the balance of trade has heavily gone in favor of Russia and against India, and this is something that both countries recognize need to be sorted. And Putin has, in fact, has himself expressed that Russia would go, and help in any which way to buy more, to import more from India on from other fronts, like say pharmaceuticals and agricultural products or whatever. So there are other commodities which they have in mind. So the point is when if Russia goes ahead and does buy all this and there is action on the ground, definitely the volume of trade will go up, and it shouldn't be a surprise if it touches 100 billion. In the sense, I'll also give you the reason. The Ukraine war is not going to last for too long. Now that there is so much of effort being made to end it, it is going to succeed sooner or later. It could be later, but it will end. So we are talking about 2030. So which means we are talking about 5 more years. So even if if it actually doesn't touch 100 billion, the volume of trade is definitely going to expand. That is the intention. And also for Russia, I think Putin is increasingly feeling more comfortable with South countries and particularly China and India. And there is a sense that he is, in fact, uh, going to rely more on, say, India and China and the other South countries rather than depending on the West, which he feels, pretty hurt about this entire issue about Ukraine and the pre-Ukraine thing, when they put pressure on Ukraine to join NATO, etc., etc. So there's been a lot of bad blood between Putin and the West, and Putin is definitely and constructively looking towards the East. So there is going to be an outcome, and let's not be surprised if it does go anywhere close to 100 billion or even touches it.
Okay. Okay. Yes, Ajay, you wanted to say something, and also the bit on the
Yeah.
media partnership. PTI has signed a memorandum of understanding with TASS, which is the Russian agency. Then we have a Russia Today, which is going to be launched in India. What does that mean? Also, a bit about what you wanted to say about the business, and then we'll go on to the media
Yeah, yeah,
partnership.
yeah.
Yes.
So I just want to just say that it's not very easy to meet 100 billion as a target. During his conversation with the India Today ladies, he said that there is a problem between India and Russia because the trade is only 63 billion, and that is only happening after we buy oil from them. And he gave the example of Belarus, which is, he said that it's a tiny country, but they have a trade of about 50 billion. So he was wondering what would be the realistic target. But I can assure you that it's not easy to do it, primarily because you don't have an agreement on reserve currency. India has been buying a lot of stuff, paying in Indian rupees. And I know for sure that Russians are going around figuring out what they should do with Indian rupees. They don't want to really buy many goods from India because they think their quality is like 50-50, or they don't agree with many of that. So they even went to the Chinese and tried to sell the Indian rupees to the Chinese. So that is some of the things that they need to sort out. Even in the past, when Soviet Union was there was rupee ruble trade which used to take place, and it all degenerated into rupee ruble being used for turning ruble into dollars and coming back to Russia for that matter. So there were switch companies which were doing it. So it is an area which is fraught with many problems. Although this time around, President Trump and President Xi Jinping are adamant that they will be able to change the course of history. They have a new transfer mechanism in place of SWIFT, and they would ensure that there is a way to do business trade in national currencies. So it's still some distance off, and India is not very keen on de-dollarization because they have said it amply many times that if they will de-dollarize, then it will become very hostile towards the US. And Mr. Trump thinks that if you de-dollarize, if BRICS countries do, this is an act against the US government, and he will do everything possible to destroy the BRICS countries. So there are a lot of
Right.
challenges that India has to face, and I don't know how they will surmount this. And similarly for Mr. Putin, Putin is in a situation where he's dealing largely with China. There's been a
Yeah.
30% increase in the trade between China and Russia. It's ever since 2022, and they haven't really suffered because of that. But when they come to deal with India, and India is more focused towards many other countries other than Russia, then India has to figure out whether they will allow a situation that they will cause a lot of exposure to Russian goods, and in the process get hurt from the Americans. So that is one part. You were asking me about the media thing. Today I went to the Russia Today office for a conversation. So it's coming out really well, and they have many Russian, uh, journalists and producers and others who are teaming. They were all very excited about it. They think that they can make a mark in India. So, what it really means is that Russia is very keen on building their narrative, controlling their narrative, and ensuring that US and the West alone does not have a say in how Indians perceive the happening in the so-called BRICS world or this SCO world. So this will be happening in the coming days, and the truth is that if the Prime Minister Modi and the government has allowed them space, so they are all ready for a confrontation between two sides, as it was seemingly visible when three
No, but
ambassadors from the Western.
is it also going to have tangible outcomes for the journalists in India in terms of jobs? Or how is it going to happen? Is Russia Today going to
Why not?
hire people?
There are more jobs.
Okay.
There are more
Okay.
jobs for Indians, all of it. In fact, they have great praise. In fact, I had a long conversation with many of their promoters, and they said
Yeah.
Indians are very good when it comes to being journalists and producers and you handling technology. So I'm sure they would rely plenty on Indians here, and there would be many channels that they are exposing Indians to. That is a Arabic channel, the Spanish channel, and there would be feed going in from India from in Hindi as well as English, and English
Okay.
would be taking care of their many channels that they can bring out from Moscow.
So that's
So
that's good.
what I was trying to say is that competition of narratives was visible when three ambassadors also wrote an article in the Times of India, and then subsequently you had the Polish ministers saying all kinds of things against India. So this will become, I think, more a regular phenomenon till I think the government of India starts reining in.
Right. All right. So, Dakshin, the concluding comments from you, and then I'll wind up the show. So, overall, how do we look at this one-day visit of Putin? And of course, we are waiting for Donald Trump to react on this. So, what would you say? Is it like a win-win both for Russia, or still lot is at stakes for India and Russia both?
Um, Putin's visit is probably just now coming to an end, so there is a lot of Putin and talk about Russia and the ins and outs or the detailing of India Russia relationship. But once this is done, Putin heads back. India still has to deal with the rest of the world. I mean, it has to
Yeah.
deal with the West. Recently in India is also has signed an agreement with the UK. So what India is, India's fundamental platform has not changed, which is that it wants to be friends with everybody. So, but today, in today's polarized kind of a situation, it's a challenge. So, it's going to be interesting to see how India can hold on to the East and the West and try to make it work for India. So I think really that's the challenge, and Putin coming and heading back is going to put this even more in sharp focus. I mean, I think
Yeah.
we need to see that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we all will wait as to what Donald Trump has to say. Thank you so much, Dakshin and Sanjay. Thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.